All right, let's jump right in. We're witnessing a massive shift in the global economy. You've got some of the world's fastest growing nations actively building an alternative to the US dollar. But here's the twist. One source we're digging into connects all of this to something much, much older, an ancient prophetic framework. It's a wild connection, so let's unpack it.
56.9%. This number right here is really at the center of everything we're talking about today. That's the US dollar's slice of the global reserves pie as of early 2026. Now, you might think, hey, that's still over half. And you're right. But it's a major drop from just 58.2% back in 2024. That tells you things are moving, and they are moving fast.
So, what's going on here? This really boils down to two huge questions for us. The first is pretty straightforward, from an economic standpoint. Why is this happening? Why this sudden rush for the exits? But the second question, that's where things get really interesting, and it's what our source material is all about. Could there really be a link between this modern currency war and ancient prophecy? Okay, so to even begin to answer that, we've got to get our heads around the mechanics of this shift. You see, this isn't happening by accident. There's a really powerful group of countries, an economic bloc, that's making a direct play against the dollar's top spot. And this chart just lays it all out, plain and simple. Look at that. It's not some slow, gentle decline over decades. We're talking about a noticeable drop in a really short amount of time. So yeah, for now, the dollar is still the king of the hill, but you can see the ground beneath it is starting to shake. So who's the challenger in this fight? It's the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they've been expanding to include countries like Iran and the UAE. And listen, these guys aren't just holding meetings and releasing statements. They are building things. They've got a pilot program for something called the unit. It's a new way to settle trades that's backed by gold. A whopping 90% of the trade between Russia and China, that's now happening in their own currencies. And they're building a whole new payment system to connect all their digital currencies. The bottom line here is this isn't just a theory. It's a real working alternative that's coming online right now. And let's be clear about why they're doing this. It's not just about making trade a little easier. The source material is crystal clear on this. Their strategic goal, the whole point of this, is to build a completely separate financial universe, one that doesn't answer to the US-led system. Okay, so to really get a feel for how high the stakes are, the source zooms in on one country in particular, Iran. Think of Iran as the economic flashpoint, the place where this cold currency war gets hot. And here's the why. Check out this number, 1.4 million. That's how many barrels of oil China is buying from Iran every single day. But here's the kicker. Almost none of that is being paid for in US dollars. Every one of those transactions is a little crack in the foundation of the dollar's dominance, what people call dollar hegemony. But, and this is a huge but, there's a problem. For all their progress, the BRICS system isn't totally free yet. As this quote from the National Interest points out, they're still forced to use parts of the dollar system. Things like insurers and clearinghouses that process the transactions. And that right there, that's their Achilles heel. It's their biggest weakness. And we just saw that weakness play out in the real world. During a recent military conflict, the source points out that when Iran, one of their key members, was attacked, the whole BRICS alliance was, silent. It took them 11 days just to put out a pretty weak statement that didn't even name an aggressor. It really exposed the political cracks in this supposedly united front. And this is where everything pivots. This is the moment where the source material we're looking at says, hold on. If you're only looking at this through the lens of economics or politics, you're missing the real story. It suggests there's a completely different way to understand all these events. Which brings us to our next section, a prophetic framework. Yeah, you heard that right. This is the part where the source makes a direct line from today's headlines, the currency wars, these new alliances, even their weaknesses, straight back to an ancient prophetic text. The core idea here revolves around a concept called the Great Controversy. It's a term that totally reframes this economic battle. It's no longer just China versus the US. Instead, it's seen as the financial battleground for a much bigger, final struggle that was described in prophecy ages ago. So, how does that actually work? How do you connect the dots? Well, the source basically acts as a decoder, mapping these modern economic signs onto very specific prophetic ideas. Now, this is where it gets really specific. The source identifies the key players by looking at the prophecies in the book of Daniel. See, in those texts, there's this constant battle between two powers, the king of the north and the king of the south. According to this interpretation, the king of the north is the United States and its dollar-based system, and the king of the south, that's the rising China-led BRICS alliance. So this whole currency war we're watching is seen as just the latest chapter in this ancient conflict.
And the framework draws another really powerful parallel. In the book of Revelation, it talks about a future time when a global power would control who could buy or sell. The source says, hey, that's not some far-off sci-fi concept. Think about what modern financial sanctions do. The US can, with a flip of a switch, cut an entire country off from the global market. It can literally control their ability to buy and sell on a global scale overnight.
This prophetic framework also talks about something it calls a movement principle, basically a time of incredibly fast, earth-shaking changes. And where do you see that happening? Just look at the gold market. The source points to the price of gold absolutely exploding in just a couple of years. At the very same time, you have central banks around the world physically moving their gold reserves, taking them out of places like New York and London and bringing them home. It's a huge, tangible movement of real wealth.
And this is the biblical verse the source points to as the frame for our current era. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. This idea of frantic movements, of information overload, is seen as a key sign of the time of the end. And these crazy, unprecedented shifts in the global economy, they're seen as a literal fulfillment of that.
So the big question is, what's the end game? Where does all of this lead? Well, the final part of this analysis lays out a pretty dramatic conclusion, what it calls a great economic reset.
The argument here is that the current conflict, it's not really the main event, it's a catalyst. The goal isn't the war itself, but the chaos and economic instability it creates. And we're talking about instability so deep, so widespread, that it forces a complete do-over of the entire global system. And according to the source, this reset happens in 3 predictable steps. Step 1, the global crisis. That's the economic fallout from the war that we're starting to see right now. Step 2, a demand for a solution. Things get so bad that people all over the world will be desperate for a fix, any fix, that brings back peace and stability. And that leads to step 3. A new system is accepted. A new form of global governance is proposed, and the world accepts it in exchange for one simple thing: the ability to buy and sell again. So let's just zoom out for a second and look at the big picture being presented here. On one side, you've got the US fighting tooth and nail to hold on to its system of control. On the other, you've got BRICS fighting to build a brand new one. But, and this is the core of the prophetic argument, it actually doesn't matter who wins this fight. The source claims that both roads, whether it's the dollar road or the BRICS road, ultimately lead to the exact same place: a single, unified global economic order. And this final system will have the power to enforce compliance on everyone. And that brings us to the final, really thought-provoking question this analysis leaves us with. We've already established that the power to control who can buy and sell exists right now in our financial systems. So if you're looking at it through this framework, the question isn't whether such a system of control is possible. The real question is, what happens when a crisis gets so bad that we, the people of the world, actually start demanding it for the sake of stability?